What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we have a fantastic show set up for you today. Nick and I are reeling off of UFC Freedom 250, 7 fights, 7 knockouts. We have so much to talk about, and of course, at the end, we're going to talk some RAF and Bam Rodriguez, who looked fantastic in boxing and potentially set up a super fight with Inoue. Everything we talk about is going to be in the timestamps below, so if there's a certain sport or fight card or fighter that you're interested in hearing about, you'll know where to find it. But Nick, we got to start with the biggest thing of the weekend, the biggest thing in combat sports, man, in a long time, right? UFC Freedom 250. There was a lot of, discussion around this card. When it first got announced, people were kind of complaining that we thought that it was going to be Ilia versus Islam, and we thought John Jones was going to be on the card. It didn't feel as big as some people had hoped it did, but man, everything from the Lincoln Memorial Press Conference to the ceremonial weigh-ins to all of the pomp and circumstance, the military band playing the walkout songs. Shout out to that guy playing guitar, who literally played Johnny Cash and then turned around and played Canción del Mariachi, which, I mean, insane. For those that don't know music, those two songs couldn't be any further from each other.
Right.
They were fantastic. Everything about this was great, but the one thing that you can never really count on if you're a UFC matchmaker, you try your best to make the matches. You try your best to build the UFC countdowns and the embeddeds and everything leading into it. But the reality is you don't go in the cage and fight. That's the one roll of the dice, right, that Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard and Dana White have to contend with. We don't know what the fighters are going to do. Are they going to go in there and lay an egg? Is this going to be boring? Forget all that. 7 fights, 7 finishes. Justin Gaethje leaves with over $800,000 in bonuses. And I guess that's the place to start.
Yeah.
We have a new American superhero, Justin the Highlight Gaethje.
Yeah, I'm so blown away with Justin. And you're right about the UFC. Like, we knew they were going to knock this out of the park. And when we started to see all the traction that this was getting, whether it was negative press, positive press, the UFC White House card was evoking a lot of emotion out of fans and haters of the UFC. But I have to say, this thing went off without a hitch. Not just last night with the fights, but everything during fight week, everything, especially once the ceremony started happening with the presser and the weigh-ins. And then, of course, the production for everybody coming out of a different part or a different room of the White House was just insane. Like, the walkouts were all epic. There wasn't a single shot that any cameraman caught this weekend that wasn't just absolutely epic and historic and just felt so regal and cool. So we knew the UFC was going to knock this out of the park, but it does heavily rely on the fighters to show up and put on the best performances possible. And when you have 7 knockouts out of 7 fights, that is batting 1,000. That is a perfect outcome for the UFC. And everybody was quick to discount the matchmaking when this first got announced a few months ago. I mean, we were expecting Islam, we were expecting John Jones, and obviously they had to adjust on the fly and get the best guys possible. But I honestly don't think that even if you had John Jones on the card or Islam Makhachev, that the card could have gone any better and the outcome inside the cage could have been any better. You know, the UFC delivered in the biggest way possible, and nobody did better as far as, showing up and delivering for the fans, showing up, delivering for their country than Justin Gaethje. I was so blown away by his ability to take the fight to Ilia Topuria. When the fight first started, we could kind of see Ilia going to what we know he does. Pressuring forward, not a whole lot of quantity, not a whole lot of volume with his offense, but stalking you, tracking you down, and trying to find his opportunities to find the big shots. And Justin Gaethje was like, all right, we've trained for this. Trevor Whitman obviously saw something that everybody else didn't really see. And Justin Gaethje immediately gets right behind his jab, and he's got weird timing on that jab. It's not like the most normal thing because a lot of fighters fight in a rhythm. Justin Gaethje has a rhythm of his own. He dances to a beat from his own drum, and that jab was really disruptive for Ilia Topuria. He throws it sort of ugly, but at the same time, he puts it straight all the way through. He extends it to the fullest of his range's capabilities, and he was able to find his target plenty. And what I thought was really impressive was, a fight can be won with a jab, but at the same time, if you overthrow a jab, a good fighter, a good striker like Ilia Topuria can start to time it and punch over the top of it, or find his entries in, use a little bit of head movement, which we know he usually has really good head movement, and start to counter you off of it. But as soon as Ilia started to pick up the timing on Justin's jab, and look, Ilia had some great moments, but as soon as he started to pick up on Justin's jab, that's when Justin started to adjust, and he took him right into that position that he loves, which is like that clinch, that dirty boxing where he grabs the head and looked for his uppercuts. Some of the uppercuts weren't landing flush early on in the fight, but as the fight continued and he was able to safely get to that position, you were seeing some great body shots, you were seeing some great uppercuts, and then the most impressive thing was his ability to disengage and usually not get hit while he was disengaging. And as a matter of fact, he was able to find shots of his own on the break whenever he was separating from Ilia. I thought it was really high level. And, Justin Gaethje is going to get all the love from me, but I also have to give a little bit of credit to Ilia Topuria because he showed us just how dog tough he is. Like,
real heart,
durable,
real tremendous heart out of Ilia.
Yeah, I mean he had some great moments too. The first round soundly went to Justin Gaethje, but it was the closest round of the night. The second round clearly went to Ilia. We thought for a second Ilia was going to get Justin out of there because he was able to put some really good combinations on him. Some of that body work was so impressive. The way he was slipping down and attacking the body looked like a professional boxer with some of that, with some of his boxing. But Justin Gaethje is just equally as tough as Ilia Topuria and was able to walk through all of it. Obviously, one of them was bleeding way more than the other. And Ilia, every time he got touched, it looked like a black eye, then another black eye, then a broken nose. And then shortly after the eyes were started to become compromised, that's when the orbital bone started to look like it was taking some damage. I was talking to our friend Mike Erickson, the doctor. He's a ringside official. And he goes, man, I would be willing to say that an orbital bone might be broken on Ilia's face just because of how quickly it started to swell up and shut his eye. So, enough good things can't be said about Justin Gaethje. This was more than just an American winning a fight against an undefeated guy. This was an undefeated Ilia Topuria looking to make history and kind of just steamrolling through the 155 division to go become a triple champion. If he would have won that fight, that's what they would have tried to do. Justin Gaethje had the deck stacked against him. Undefeated champion. He had never actually been undisputed. This was in his country, at the White House, on the lawn.
Pressure's on him.
Everything is pressure, and Ilia might have put his own pressure on himself, but Justin Gaethje showed up and delivered. He is the American hero, and his name will forever be etched in history as maybe the most iconic and impressive victory in a UFC title fight that we've ever seen. I certainly can't think of one that tops what Justin Gaethje just did.
It was one of the best fights I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And, a few things stick out as far as Justin's performance. And to me, Justin Gaethje is heart, courage, just grit personified, right? He was badly hurt in that second round.
Yeah.
Badly hurt.
He said his liver was still hurting at the press conference.
Imagine, an hour later, his liver is still hurting at the press conference. Ilia Topuria, and this is what I want everybody to understand, Ilia Topuria did not have an off night.
No.
Ilia, and I'm seeing people say that, Ilia wasn't himself. No. Ilia Topuria looked like Ilia Topuria.
Yeah.
He came across the cage. He was throwing big shots. He was landing big shots. He was grappling well. He was hunting submissions. He was doing ground and pound. The problem with Ilia Topuria last night was not having an off night. The problem was that his on night was not as good as the on night that Justin Gaethje had for 100%. Himself. Justin Gaethje deserves all the credit. And if we say that Ilia had an off night, it diminishes a little bit the performance. So I don't think at all we can say, that was a bad Ilia, that was a compromised Ilia, that was an off-night Ilia. None of that. Ilia Topuria showed up to fight. He showed up until the bitter end. I don't know who actually called the fight. When I first saw it when we were doing the live stream, and shout out to everybody that came to the live stream, over, I think, 7,000 people in total. So you guys are awesome. We had a good time last night. But, so I was trying to listen, but also comment at the same time. And it looked to me like Alexandre Topuria stopped the fight. Now, somebody said, no, it wasn't Alexandre. Alexandre said to keep going and fight this through, and it was the other coach. I don't know exactly who it was that called it quits.
Yeah.
But thankfully, somebody in Ilia's corner, and a lot of people are calling Ilia a quitter today. And let's get real. Like, Ilia Topuria fought until he couldn't fight no more, right? He was badly beaten. And if he had had the opportunity to go back out for that fifth round, it could have ended his career. Like, I don't think it's outrageous to say that one more round like that could have potentially ended Ilia Topuria's career in the UFC altogether. Now, is he going to be compromised after this? Probably so. Yeah. We've never seen him take that kind of beating before. And we know when you take those types of beatings, just Google search for yourself people before and after they fight Justin Gaethje.
Yeah.
And I don't care. Justin might not have that one punch KO power, but sometimes that's actually more of a curse than it is a blessing. It's better to just get starched and get it out of the way than to be bludgeoned as, you know, Ilia Topuria and all those that came before him.
And have your team step in to stop the fight.
Exactly. You know, and Justin Gaethje, two things I want to say about him, because to me, this fight was all about, and we talked about this in the buildup, chaos versus order.
Yeah.
You know, he is the most chaotic fighter in the UFC.
It's wild.
Ilia Topuria, a very orderly fighter. He likes to fight under his circumstances. He's going to fight at his pace.
In total control.
He's going to pressure when he wants to pressure. He's going to engage on his terms. And so what I said in the buildup to that was, this fight's going to come down to who wins the chaos versus order battle. Now, I predicted that the order battle would win out. I was wrong. I had Ilia Topuria winning that fight, as did many.
Everybody.
But Justin Gaethje, the other thing that I want to mention is the offensive wrestling, because when we were talking this fight and talking buildup, I said everybody's got this wrong. Everybody thinks Justin Gaethje's working offensive wrestling because he doesn't want to strike with Ilia. He's going to try to get him to the ground and hold him there. And I said, not so fast. He needs an opportunity, and this is where it ties back to the first point, to create chaos in order.
Yeah.
And so if he can go for those doubles and go for those singles and go for those snap downs, it's going to cause these moments of scramble, which is going to cause Ilia to be slightly off balance, slightly out of position, and that's where he can land those big shots.
Yeah.
And that's what him and Trevor had cooked up. I think Trevor is one of the most brilliant minds in the game. He said he saw tendencies in Ilia Topuria's game, and he proved us all right. He had an absolutely stellar game plan for his pupil in Justin Gaethje, and Justin followed it to a T.
Yeah, and Justin Gaethje largely fought this in 3 different ranges, right? So he was able to maintain a long jab and stay in like a kickboxing range or an extended boxing range. He knew that true boxing range was the most dangerous place to fight Ilia, and that's why I really liked how he was able to bypass that range and get right into a dirty boxing range. And luckily, he found a safe place there. Like, he wasn't really taking much damage. Of course, Ilia threw some beautiful body shots and some uppercuts as well. It was kind of cool to see like both guys sort of hanging on each other's necks and throwing that kind of like schoolyard fighting almost.
It was a brawl.
But technical at the same time. And I think it was really impressive that Justin was able to basically find safe places. Now, Justin got hit a lot. Ilia landed some beautiful strikes, and I actually think the reason Ilia lost this fight was because he blew his wad in round 2, trying to go for the finish. Justin Gaethje's hard to get out of there. He's even harder to finish by KO or TKO in a title fight. Like, that just doesn't happen. So Justin Gaethje, being able to absorb the damage much better than Ilia is part of the reason he got out of that second round and then got into the third round, and Ilia wasn't recovered from that. Because when you go out there guns a-blazing, and Ilia tried to go for an armbar at one point, he tried to go really hard and gung-ho with the ground and pound. And of course, when he thought that he could get Justin out of there on the feet, that's when he really started to chunk heavy leather, throw his heaviest punches, and that's exhausting. As well, the offensive wrestling. Everybody knows, and we say it ad nauseum here, offensive wrestling is the most exhausting thing you can do in MMA, because you're trying to grab a hold of a guy that weighs the same thing as you essentially and take him to the ground and control him. And also, by the way, he knows how to defend that stuff. Right. So Ilia Topuria fatigued. I think fatigue is what started to break him, and then the accumulation of damage put on by Justin Gaethje is what actually ended up breaking him. Now, he was down but wasn't out until the end of that 4th round. And I don't know exactly what happened, right? I don't speak Spanish, and I couldn't really tell because of all the noise surrounding the event. But I think that Ilia Topuria is the one that actually decided to call it quits.
Oh, do you?
Because I think his brother Alexandre said, no, we're going to finish the fight. We're going to finish the fight. And, I don't know. It's really hard to say because everybody's talking and you don't know exactly who the subtitles are coming out of their mouth. And it was really hard to tell. But it felt to me like once we saw Ilia try to go sit down and like miss the stool and almost fell onto his butt, it was like, okay, I think Ilia might be the one that called it, because he put his head down. He must have said something to his brother that was contrary to what his brother was saying, which is let's get to the end of this fight.
Or was it the coach that was saying
Or
that?
it could have been the coach.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to have to go back, and I have watched it a few times, but I can't really tell who's talking because the angle of the camera doesn't really show them talking. It sort of shows their bodies, and then it shows Ilia sitting on the stool, but his head was down, so you can't really read his lips. But I think Ilia Topuria realized that he needs to live to see another day and make it through this. Obviously, it's going to be a long road to recovery, a long layoff for the former champion. But yeah, I think that they made the right decision, regardless of who decided to call the fight. And also, I don't know what happened at the end of the third round, because in some ways it felt like it should have been ended after 3, and it would have gone 2-1 to Justin Gaethje and a stoppage, a doctor stoppage after 3. But the doctor wasn't really sure what he should do, and Mark Goddard's like, "Are we continuing or not?" And Ilia says he wants to fight. The doctor's saying no. Mark Goddard says, "I'm going to trust the fighter over this inexperienced doctor, and we're going to get back out there." So I don't know. I'm not going to place blame on anybody or point fingers at anybody, because I think that they made the right decision, and I actually think that round 2 and round 4 were Ilia's best rounds, essentially. Yeah. So I'm glad we saw that 4th round, but I also was a little bit concerned for Ilia's health by the time that 4th round was coming to a close, because he was getting really beat up. And Justin Gaethje, like, I didn't look at the stats. I said I wanted to look at them. Justin Gaethje couldn't miss. Yeah. Justin Gaethje was throwing a beautiful jab. When he'd close distance, he would find his dirty boxing exchanges. And anytime he would extend and throw his rear hand, he knew exactly how to get a hold of Ilia, because Ilia is not the kind of guy that even if you start to throw big shots at him, he's not going to take 2 steps back and get out of range. He's going to start to slip. And Justin was like, okay, I know he likes to shift downward and kind of stay in range so he can find his close shots. So if he does that, as soon as I extend on a 2-punch combination, I'm going to go grab his head with my now free hand and basically close the distance on him. It's just like somebody at the, if you're at the end of somebody's punches, that's where they're most dangerous. If you can close that distance in half and they can only half punch you now, a lot of the pop comes off of that shot. And if you get so close to where you're head and head and maybe your head's resting on their shoulder, now they have no leverage to land any sort of power. And Justin Gaethje was able to manipulate the range so beautifully. Obviously we can go deeper and deeper on this, and we did go give an immediate reaction last night, another live stream right after the fights live stream, so we got a little bit technical in there too, but I thought it was just a masterful performance from Justin Gaethje, and it was so rewarding to see. As an American, I love all fighters from all every corner of the earth. I love everybody. I just want to see the best fight the best. And I was a little worried that Justin Gaethje was maybe 1 foot in, 1 foot out. After last night, I do not want to see Justin Gaethje retire. I think even at 37 years old, he is the best lightweight in the world. He just beat the undefeated juggernaut that didn't even seem human in Ilia Topuria. And I don't know what's next for Justin Gaethje, but the way he showed up for his country, for his team, for his family, for the small town in Arizona he comes from, and then for himself, he was made to be the undisputed champion of the UFC, and good things happen to good people. Justin Gaethje seems like a legend, a great guy, and I'm just reeling off of this one.
Yeah, blown away, and that's a perfect segue because that's where we're going next with the conversation. But just before we do, I want to say, with regards to the doctor's stuff that happened, the doctor was very clearly saying no in round 3. Mark Goddard overruled that. He was like, I'm going to let this go for a minute. But he did say to Ilia, you need to find yourself a way back in this fight or it's over. And Ilia said yes. So, obviously that 3rd round, Ilia did start the 4th round. He landed some big shots. I mean, there was never a round where Justin Gaethje wasn't in some kind of danger because Ilia is just that guy as far as the power is concerned. But then the round really took a bad turn for Topuria. The knockdowns, the knee to the ribs, his eyes were swollen. And while, yes, it was, so what it would have been at the end of round 3 would have been a TKO doctor stoppage had the doctor stoppage been what stood. What ended up happening is it was a corner stoppage, but I believe had the corner not stopped it, Goddard was getting the doctor back in there. And if the doctor was saying no at the end of round 3, there's no way that he was saying yes at the end of round 4. So either way, it was about to get stopped.
Yeah, and Ilia mounted a whole bunch of pressure on himself, right? Like he came out and said that he could beat Terrence Crawford in boxing, he could beat Shakur Stevenson in boxing, Ryan Garcia he would make quick work of in boxing, and now everybody's quick to jump on Ilia and say, you thought you could beat me in a fight? Excuse me, it's a boxing match that you could beat Ilia in, because if you got into an octagon with Ilia Topuria, he would make you look worse than Justin Gaethje made him look. But I do understand that, you know,
he did call them out, though, to be fair. He's calling them out for their sport. So they kind of had their moment in the sun, unfortunately.
I know, and I get it. Everybody, you know, especially because when somebody tries to call their shots the way Ilia does, and you come with this brashness, like one of the narratives coming out of this weekend is, will Ilia Topuria ever be the same, or is humble Topuria going to become the next best guy behind who was the brash, confident, you know, cocky Topuria? Because it really, this is going to be an eye-opening experience for him, and I can't wait to see. I have a feeling we're going to get sort of like no response, no sort of attention from social media. He said his piece. He said he wants a rematch with Justin Gaethje. Their story's not over and all that. But yeah, I just think that the piling on isn't necessary. But at the same time, Ilia Topuria did sort of make his bed, and now he's got to lay in it. And he talked a big game. And maybe you shouldn't go out there calling out these great boxers, saying you can beat them in boxing. We all know that the boxers beat MMA fighters in boxing, and the MMA fighters whoop their ass in MMA. But Ilia Topuria did mount more pressure on himself than even Justin Gaethje mounted onto himself, or anything that anybody even close on this card. Nobody had the amount of pressure put on them than Justin Gaethje, and Justin Gaethje than Ilia Topuria, and Ilia Topuria put all of that pressure on himself. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough go for the champ. He lost his undefeated record now forever. He can never get that back.
It's out of his Instagram bio, by the way. He didn't put 17-1. He didn't go so far as to put 17-1.
Just delete the record.
But he took the record off completely. So he's acknowledging, I'm not the guy I thought I was. Maybe I need to go back and reassess things. And that's the perfect move into what's next, because he wants a rematch with Gaethje. I want to talk Gaethje first, but just quick note on that. He will never get a rematch with Justin Gaethje. No. Justin Gaethje is likely, I think, 35 to 40% chance going to retire, depending on who the opponent is. But the opponent for sure will not be Ilia Topuria. Ilia needs a long time to heal. Probably we won't see Ilia Topuria fight for 9 to 12 months at minimum. Justin Gaethje, I believe, will be off into the sunset, playing golf with Trevor Whitman by then.
Yeah.
So let's talk Justin Gaethje first, and then what's next for Ilia Topuria, because Ilia's got a longer horizon. I do have a fun matchup for him, but I want to talk Justin Gaethje first, because there's a couple of things, right? There's three options as I see it. And Justin Gaethje doesn't really want to. He had the pinnacle of moments in the UFC last night.
Sure.
There's a picture of him backflipping off the cage with the White House in the background.
Almost broke his neck on the second backflip. Once he landed back in the octagon, he did another backflip.
Yeah. Justin Gaethje breaks his neck after winning the undisputed belt in true Justin Gaethje fashion. But so to me, there's no moment that he's going to have that's ever going to top that in his fighting career. That's the pinnacle of this sport.
Right.
So three avenues. Avenue number one, Charles Oliveira is actively calling him out on social media, saying, hey, I got a belt, you got a belt, let's put our belts on the line. I got a win over you. You tried to get this BMF belt. We always talked about the undisputed belt eluded you, but there's also one other belt that's eluded you, and that's this BMF belt that I'm now holding. Let's lay it all on the line. Let's put both belts on the line. That's an option. The other option is who a lot of people think is the rightful contender to take on Justin Gaethje for the belt next, the undisputed belt. And actually, if you can believe it, Arman Tsarukyan, almost 50% chance, if you look at call sheet, for who's going to be the champion of lightweight by the end of 2026, I will add. So there's a lot that would need to happen there. Insert the next wild card, if you will. That would be the winner of Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway. Max Holloway heavily favored in that fight. Justin was slimed out by Max with 1 second left, but it wasn't like he was winning the fight and got caught. Max dominated that fight. So maybe he wants to have his get back on Max Holloway. Those are the three avenues I see, and it's interesting to see what the market thinks of Arman, because I don't think that Justin wants to necessarily. To me, the Arman fight is the most risky and the least reward for Justin. Obviously, a Conor fight would be huge, but Conor unlikely to get past Max. But Max has that win over Justin. Charles has that win over Justin, and Charles has the BMF belt.
Yeah.
So, where do you see Justin Gaethje? And I know you do your Matchmaker Monday. If you guys haven't checked it out, every Monday night at 8 p.m. Central, Nick goes live, Matchmaker Monday, where he talks about all the fights that happen and what matchups he'd like to see next. It's a fun, interactive live chat, so make sure you check that out.
Yeah,
but
come hang out tonight. And I'll
give
give
us a preview now.
Yeah, I'll give you my opinion. So Justin Gaethje obviously can do whatever he wants. He could retire, and we wouldn't be upset with him, but I don't want to see him retire. Arman Tsarukyan, his value went up even more, right? Not only did his net worth go up by $5.7 million,
his friend's net worth.
His friend's net worth.
He was they were quick to make that distinction.
Yes, and I don't think there's any issues. So I think everything was kosher as far as it's concerned, and I don't think there's any issues with the $1 million bet that was placed on Justin Gaethje to win this fight. But Arman Tsarukyan's value in the division just went up even more. I would love to see Arman Tsarukyan versus Justin Gaethje, and I think that fight makes a lot of sense. Also, I don't really think that Charles Oliveira is going to be at the top of the list as far as opponents. We've seen him as the champion before. We kind of need some new parity at the division because we don't know how long Charles is going to fight. He signed an extension on his contract, but I don't know if he's going to fight that thing out. I think it's like 8 more fights. I don't know if I see Charles fighting 8 more times. But that brings me back to the 170 fight that'll be headlining UFC 329 next, Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway. Now, that's a 170 fight, but it has implications for 155. Max Holloway's never fought at 170 before. He's doing this because Conor doesn't want to cut weight. And I don't say that Conor McGregor's ever going to go back to 155 unless there's a title on the line. I don't think Conor is so big that he can't make 155 again. I think he doesn't want to, and he's such a star that the UFC is allowing him to basically come in without a major weight cut. But I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say Conor McGregor versus Justin Gaethje gets me excited. I don't think that Conor has a very good chance of winning that fight, but it's a very interesting style fight because Justin Gaethje has never been the guy, even though he comes from a serious wrestling background, to utilize very much wrestling. He's going to stand and trade with Conor McGregor. Now, obviously, Max is the big favorite in that fight, and Max has the win over Justin. So I would love to be in Max Holloway's position right now. I got Conor McGregor next up, and if I beat him, there's a good chance that the champion at 155, my new division, wants to fight me and get his get back on me. So I think that Max Holloway and Conor McGregor are very viable options for Justin Gaethje's first title defense as the undisputed champion at 155.
Is that not the craziest thing to say in the world? That Conor McGregor is a viable option for an undisputed 155 shot.
Yeah, it's bizarre, but at the same time, like, who else is there? Obviously, we got Arman, we got Charles, but I feel like the UFC felt like Charles burned them a little bit with that BMF fight. And while he has a belt and Justin has a belt, we've also we've seen everything that we need to see out of Charles Oliveira. Max Holloway is a very viable contender, especially coming off a win over the biggest star in the sport in Conor McGregor. But same thing can be said if Conor McGregor, and we don't do MMA math here because it never ends up making much sense, but Conor McGregor beat Max Holloway a long time ago, but he beat him. Max Holloway beat Justin Gaethje, knocked him out. Justin Gaethje's now the champion. So the pecking order is all sorts of screwed up. But I think that if Conor McGregor and Max Holloway put on an epic performance, and we don't see Conor come out looking like Nate Diaz at the MVP card, but we see him kind of look like he did a few years ago, there is a real case to be made for the winner of Max versus Conor getting Justin Gaethje for his first and maybe his only title defense at 155.
And that would essentially just be, the UFC doing a solid for the most exciting fighter in the history of their sport. But Conor would have to get past Max first. The thing about Max, real quick, before we move into the co-main event, is I love that thought process. It's just, it was this year that we saw Max dominated by Oliveira. So that's what I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
Why, I think you're leaning maybe a little bit more Max. I'm leaning a little bit more Charles. I mean, I know
I think Arman's the number one. I think Arman truly, they should avoid.
But do you think Justin would retire instead of fight? Because there's not a whole lot on the line.
Yeah. Well,
right?
see, Justin Gaethje has officially put himself in extremely rare air. Not only is he now the champion, but he just won the belt in the biggest one-off event that the UFC's ever put on. So if they say, all right, your next match is BSD, or your next match is Arman Tsarukyan, he may go, those guys haven't done enough in the sport. I'm not going to go out there and give them the opportunity to get one up on me when I could just retire. If there's an opportunity for me to get a rematch against Max Max Holloway and try to avenge my loss, I'm in. If there's a chance for me to get red panty night against Conor McGregor, count me in, especially because I think his odds would be quite in favor of him to win that fight. But if it's like, all right, we're just going to shuffle you in, maybe a Mauricio Ruffy, he could go, look, that's not really my style anymore. I want to fight legends. I just beat a legend. I'm looking for things that are a little bit higher magnitude than, say, a BSD or a Arman Tsarukyan. But at the same time, Arman Tsarukyan is the most viral guy in the game right now. He can't miss. He can't even miss on predictions. Yeah. So, I think that Arman is the number one option in my opinion. And as you said, Kalshi is kind of leaning towards him being a heavy favorite to wind up being a champion by the end of this year. I don't know if we see it this year or not, but I think that they're going to scrap the idea of Charles versus Arman for the BMF. And then they're going to really look at Justin versus Arman, and then also keep an eye on how Conor looks and how Max look when they fight next month.
There we go. I think that's a perfect bookend on the main event, and what a main event it was. But we have to give some shine to the Frenchman, Ciryl Gane. Woo! He was the first one to have a Freedom 250 belt wrapped around his waist.
Yeah, and looked good on him, too, even coming from France.
Yes, he did, and he was happy to have it. The French colors are red, white, and blue, too, so it works as well. He could just say, you know what? They put the colors of the French flag on here.
They don't
just
have the stars and stripes, but they do have the red, white, and blue.
There we go. Cyryl's a really good fighter, man. Dude. Oh, my God, he's good. And
so high level.
It just I don't want to bring John Jones into the conversation too early, but it's hard to have this conversation without talking about Bones Jones. We'll get to him in a minute. Let's talk technique, right?
Okay.
Alex Pereira, visibly slower.
Yeah.
Not able to handle the speed, the movement, which is odd because usually when lighter weight guys come up,
speed is their advantage.
Right. If you think about guys that have come up divisions and had success, it's usually because they're more fast or they're faster and they're more technical than the bigger guys. Neither of those were true. Right. Ciryl was more technical and he was faster than Alex Pereira. So let's talk performance for Ciryl and then get into what's next for each guy.
Yeah, so Ciryl looked incredible, and he had to deal with a lot coming from Pereira. Pereira started with some beautiful head kicks right to start the fight, and I feel like Pereira maybe should have concealed that weapon a little bit longer and not spammed it as much as he did, because Ciryl was able to pick up the timing on it, and it did keep Cyryl's hand sort of at bay, and he was mostly dealing with his lead hand and utilizing kicks and stuff like that. But Ciryl was able to understand, okay, I know what he wants. He wants to kick me in the head with that back leg. I'm not going to let that happen. And by about the fourth or fifth one, Ciryl actually ended up getting under it, and Alex Pereira overkicked and went over 6'3" or 6'4" Ciryl Gane's head with a kick, which was crazy. But as soon as I saw Pereira sort of limiting himself and looking for specific things, kind of like Ilia Topuria was, it did raise a little bit of concern. Now, I was one of the people that predicted Ciryl Gane to win this fight. I thought we were going to see the highest level kickboxing MMA striking match at heavyweight that we've ever seen. We absolutely did get that. The feints.
From Cyryl's side, for sure.
Yeah, and even Alex, I don't want to say Alex fought poorly because I don't want to take away from Ciryl. Alex looked great, but this was very high level, and there's such dire consequences at heavyweight because while we've seen, Pereira knock out a whole lot of people, we've also seen him knocked out at 185. And when you're dealing with a guy who couldn't make 185, even if he was on his deathbed in Ciryl Gane, you just have to understand that power is different, durability is different at heavyweight. And Ciryl Gane was able to take some shots. He's really good at being elusive and avoiding any sort of damage that could be thrown his way. I thought he fought a perfect fight. His game plan was really sharp, and then his finishing instincts when he did finally hurt Pereira were very impressive. He largely got it done with his hands once he had Pereira rocked. And I also want to give a little bit of credit to Pereira for fighting back up to his feet. Once he got dropped, he had Ciryl Gane on him, just throwing bombs. There were a couple, I'd say about 9 shots that
back of the head shots,
were pretty close to the back of the head. Now, at the end of the day, when you're scrambling, it really is hard, right? Like if I'm somebody who, let's just say you're doing a spinning attack and you spin right when somebody throws a head kick and it hits you square in the back of the head, you can't really be blamed for that. And while that's not what we saw, we did see a ground and pound situation, but we also saw Pereira sort of scrambling from the bottom. And that can change the direction of the shot. But we also remember that Ciryl Gane was throwing these elbows, right? That's what he was trying to throw to finish Alex Pereira. So when he's throwing those, you don't want to land it with your forearm, right? We're not throwing like this. We're looking to land the bone right as flush and as pointed as we possibly can. And so what it looks like is you're throwing that right to the back of the ear, but the rest of your arm is landing directly on the back of his head. So I'm not gonna take anything from Ciryl, because I thought it was a brilliant performance, and I think Alex Pereira's ability to get back up to the feet, only to be finished on the feet with nothing going to the back of his head, was very impressive. But I think that Ciryl Gane, he skated by with a very good victory, and Alex Pereira, in my opinion, is contemplating whether you should go back to 205 or stay at heavyweight. If you want my opinion, it's stay at heavyweight, because if you go back to 205, you've basically killed all your chances of being triple champion. And I don't think that we should just say, okay, this experiment at heavyweight didn't work out, let's send him back down and fight Carlos Ulberg. No, Josh Hokit and him have some heat. I think that Josh Hokit versus Alex Pereira would be a very fun fight to watch, and it would mean something. And if he could beat Josh Hokit, who is on a, just an ass-whipping tour, and he is coming very fast to the top of the division, if he could beat Hokit, given the fact that we've got, Pavlovich and Volkov, and then there's really nobody else. Tom Aspinall is coming back, but we don't really know with the Eddie Hearn thing how all that's going to shake out. Alex Pereira could wind up fighting for a world title at heavyweight again sooner than later, just because of the lack of depth at heavyweight. So I want to see Alex Pereira stay at heavyweight, figure out this frame, maybe pull 10 pounds off. You don't have to show up more heavy and bigger than Gane. Show up at 240 or show up at 231 like Josh Hokit. Those types of things can make a difference, and I don't think one fight should end the experiment for Alex Pereira at heavyweight. But I do have to give all the credit in the world to Ciryl Gane, because he showed up and he beat arguably the best striker in UFC history, probably the most credentialed striker, and the first guy to ever go for triple champ status. So hats off to Ciryl Gane.
Yeah, no, Bongamin showed up. And the reality is that I don't think anybody can strike with Ciryl at heavyweight.
No.
Maybe even Tom included, and that was kind of going in that direction. Now, Ciryl did the dirty eye pokes. We have to call him out on that. He had a great performance last night, but Ciryl is not the cleanest fighter in the world. So I agree. If you're scrambling some of the back of the head stuff, you can't, if I'm fighting you, I can't control what you do, and I don't know exactly what you're going to do. But some of those, Alex was kind of settled, and he was still throwing them down. At least we didn't see the eye pokes last night.
Yeah.
So, but take the eye pokes aside for a minute. Ciryl Gane was looking good in that fight against Tom. And Tom may reassess and say, you know what, I'm going to grapple this SOB in the next fight. I saw how John Jones did it. I'm going to take a page out of his book, and I'm going to do that, because I don't think anybody at heavyweight wants to really stand and strike with Ciryl. He's too quick, he's too elusive, and he's too accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, he also has good power, which, he's never been a one-punch KO guy, but he took Poatan out of there last night, which is very impressive.
Yeah, and I think the only way to beat Ciryl Gane is to take him to the ground and beat him up, because he engages on his own terms when it comes to the striking. If he doesn't like what he sees, he's taking steps back and resetting, and then he'll start to chop legs. He does that push kick down to the, or oblique kick if you want to call it that, but that push kick to the front leg. He loves that kind of stuff. John Jones figured out how to beat him. He figured out very early in that fight, and I think in the first 10, 15, maybe 30 seconds of that fight, John Jones got kicked in the nuts and poked in the eye all in one fell swoop. So he was like, all right, I'm not going to play this game. I'm not going to wind up getting a no contest or a disqualification with Ciryl Gane. I'm going to take him down and squeeze his head off. And that's exactly what he did. And I have to mention the post that John Jones made last night, because it was
the goat chain,
the subliminal, but it said a lot. He had a chain around his neck, and there were two guys on this card, Ilia Topuria and Alex Pereira, who were both gunning for GOAT status. And I think they both would have been one step closer to stealing that from John Jones had they won. But being the GOAT of this sport is a lot easier said than done, and John Jones has never lost. I know he hasn't lost on his record to Matt Hamill, but that technique that got him disqualified is now legal in this sport. So we have to understand.
Imagine beating a guy's ass so bad that he wins the fight, because you were kicking his butt so bad that we have to give him the win. That's basically what happened.
Yeah.
So John Jones, aside from that, is a completely unblemished fighter.
And it sucks, though, because John Jones, knowing he's the GOAT and knowing that there's really nothing left for him unless Ciryl Gane can go fight Tom Aspinall, possibly lose. If he loses to Tom Aspinall, I could see where they'd maybe try to bring John back. But what's the point? And how long would we have to wait?
Again?
No, I'm saying if Ciryl loses to Tom, then maybe you have the Tom versus John. But I feel like all of the luster for that has gone away. I think that Ciryl Gane versus John Jones 2 would go no differently than the first one. So it's weird, but at the same time, I feel like John Jones gave us some answers last night. Like he told us, yes, I'm the GOAT, but also the fight and the results told us that, look, I'm not in risk of losing my GOAT status to anybody except for maybe Islam Makhachev in a few fights. But all that being said, John Jones is the GOAT of this sport. He has a win over the heavyweight champion right now, and he made it look very easy. And the only guy that people thought could steal that GOAT status from John directly would have been Alex Pereira. Now there's really no chance. He's 1-2 in his last 3 fights. And unfortunately for the rest of the world, they're going to have to wait until we get a new GOAT in the sport. But right now, as it sits, John Jones is still that guy.
Yeah, and I believe Islam Makhachev can get there with a few more title defenses at 170.
Sure.
But, you know, as it stands right now, and I know that people always bring up the picograms and stuff like that, and I understand that, and the sport was a different sport back in the day, and I know the Gustafsson 1 fight, I know the Dominic Reyes, I know all of the talking points.
Yeah.
But, John, there's a few things that would get John back. Unfortunately, Ciryl Gane being the undisputed champion, if he beats Tom Aspinall, is not one of them.
Yeah.
One would be, and this is not going to happen, period, end of story, would be the UFC releases him and he goes to Netflix to fight Francis.
Yeah, not going to happen.
The UFC would not allow what is, you know, touting themselves to be the UFC's biggest competitor to put on the biggest heavyweight fight. They're just, that's not good for business. The UFC is not going to do that.
Yeah.
There's really no reason or anything for John to prove to come back and fight Ciryl again.
No.
So if Ciryl beats Tom Aspinall and the UFC is not going to release him, he's kind of between a rock and a hard place. Now, why is Alex Pereira still interesting at heavyweight? Because Alex Pereira is only ever 1 win away from another title shot.
Sure.
So you get Ciryl Gane and Tom in there. Let's say Tom comes and gets his revenge. He vindicates himself. He beats Ciryl Gane. And they make the Hokit versus Pereira, and Pereira knocks out Josh Hokit.
Yeah.
They will then make Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall.
Yes.
So, you know, if John Jones can insert himself somewhere in that equation, if Tom gets his belt back, if Alex somehow gets the belt, because again, as I said, he needs to beat Josh Hokit and then beat Tom Aspinall. Very, very difficult thing to do.
And we're talking about 18 months of time to pass.
Or let's look at the other side of that. Josh Hokit beats Alex Pereira and then he gets the belt.
Yeah.
You know, he's becoming a big name in the sport. Let's say that Josh Hokit this time next year is the undisputed champion.
John Jones is pupil and Gable Steveson can do all the talking for him in the cage.
Yeah,
I don't think John Jones is coming back because of the results of Pereira versus Gane. I think that if Josh Hokit starts to call for John Jones, he can say, you haven't earned that, my friend, but I got a guy who's coming. He's about to make his debut at International Fight Week. It's Gable Steveson. If you can beat him, maybe I'll entertain the idea. But at that point, we're talking about a 40-something-year-old John Jones. It's just not worth it at that point.
What if Tom beats Ciryl?
It depends on how it goes, right? If Tom goes to war with Ciryl and it's 5 rounds, we understand what John did to Ciryl, so there's really nothing there. And
but we know what Max did to Justin Gaethje.
True, MMA
and we
math
know what Ilia did to Max.
Yeah, true.
So you can't. MMA math is a tough one, right?
Yeah,
so people I would still want to see it.
Yeah,
you know, and I think with them. They've had heat for a long time, right? Yeah. And Tom was respectful in the beginning. I had nothing against you. I just think I'm better than you, and I want to fight you. And it's kind of gotten nastier over the years, but I'm still somewhat interested in Aspinall versus Jones if Tom can beat Ciryl.
Yeah.
I am still interested in that fight if those outcomes happen.
Yeah, but we got to get the ball rolling on that because John's only getting older with time. So I think as long as he's, you know, happy with where he's at in his career and able to stay active to some level in the gym, I think he'll be able to compete with those guys for sure. But if we wait 12 months or whatever and he's just chilling and coaching and stuff like that, then I think the chances go down and down and down.
Yeah, agreed. And so let's move into Sugar Sean O'Malley.
Great performance.
Eamon Zahabi, he said he manifested it. He said, I feel, it's crazy to say Joe Rogan, but I feel like I've been here before.
I've seen this.
Sean he's very much a cerebral, introspective, very mental. So he takes those aspects to the game, meditation and all that. And he said that he knew this was going to happen. He saw himself knocking out Arman Zahabi and then saluting the crowd with a walk-off KO, which is exactly what he did. Wants to fight Peter Yan. So let's touch on this a little bit. Thoughts on Sean's performance. And I do like that he called out Peter Yan regardless of outcome, because I don't think many of us want to see Merab 3, right?
No.
And so he knows that. Sean's got his finger on the pulse of what the fans want. Sean he's got his own podcast with MMA Guru and his Timbo and
he's
all that.
He's a workhorse too. They filmed a podcast at like 4:30 a.m. Eastern time last night after he fought and everything. So I can't say enough good things about Sugar Sean and Tim Welch.
For sure. And so, he knows that Peter Yan is the fight. Everybody thinks that Peter beat him. And it was a very close fight. I guess you could make an argument either way. I think Peter definitely has a strong argument. But the best case scenario for Sean is they make Yan versus Merab soon, and that Yan were win that fight, right? And so if that happens, then, clear cut, boom, you're next in line for the title. If Merab wins, he still wants Peter, which I love that, actually.
Yeah, I do too. And before I give you my opinion on what should happen next, I do want to give a little bit of technical analysis on this fight. So for Arman Zahabi does so many things that I absolutely hate defensively, but the dude is hard to hit. He's one of those guys, and the inside leg kicks that he just chops at 100%. They're never going to win you the fights, but man, they can do a lot of damage. I would assume Sugar Sean's inside thigh is a little bit sore right now. He may need to go get it massaged out. But Arman Zahabi has such a weird style, and Sugar Sean showed us a real ability to adjust on the fly. He's never been a headhunter, and he does get very precise with his striking when he does go for the main targets. But he realized that Arman was doing this weird sort of defensive maneuver, which was leaving his body totally exposed. And a lot of times we see people looking to aim for the body in MMA because the range is different than boxing. You wind up overextending when you try to punch the body, just because they're a little bit further away. And I was a little bit concerned how he was going to get down there and attack that body, but he was able to do it pretty well and not really take any damage while he was doing it, mostly because Arman Zahabi wasn't throwing anything. He was sort of just dancing around,
it was weird,
staying really far away from Sugar. And obviously you can't really have a fight if one guy's out of range the entire time. And it's weird to see Sean, who's so good at utilizing every square inch of the cage, being the guy who's just like, all right, am I just going to have to march this guy down and figure it out? It's like he was in the military marching there on the White House lawn trying to get to Arman Zahabi. And Zahabi, the Canadian, was very elusive. But Sean knew, as long as I can track him down, figure out what he's doing, I have the skills and the fight IQ to figure out when he'll be open. He was able to find a beautiful combination over the top when Arman finally did start to lean more into like a Philly shell situation. Now that was a precise combination that Sugar threw, because a lot of times when you see guys throw a 1-2, they wind up throwing it at two different targets, and not for a bad reason, right? A lot of people have good head movement. So when you throw the one here, the head's going to go this way. You send the two where the head's headed. But what he realized is Arman's not moving his head a whole lot. He's kind of staying stationary and then using his feet to move laterally. So if I can put this one straight down the pipe right off at an angle and then leave the two directly behind the one, I can actually, double up on my power shots.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he did. The sealing it off with the salute was just epic. Some people were saying it was an early stoppage. I don't think so. I think that he folded Arman like a lawn chair, and then Arman worked his way back up only to get dropped again. And Arman was out on his feet and then got actually put out. And you could see it on his face. Like his eyes were not actually that of a fighter who's still locked into the game. So Sugar Sean didn't celebrate a little too early, but he did call his shot and got exactly what he wanted, exactly what he promised his fans, a walk-off KO. That's the hardest thing to predict and actually make happen in a UFC fight. Sugar Sean did it, and my opinion for what should happen following that performance at Freedom 250 is Sugar Sean O'Malley needs to go and figure out how he can work himself back into a title shot, whether Merab wins or Peter. But I say if Peter Yan wins his next fight against Merab, they should move Peter Yan up to 145 and let him face Volkanovski. I feel like Yan has deserved the opportunity to go for champ status, especially if he can beat Merab again, beat Merab in this next fight. So if we can see, and I just selfishly want to see Jan versus Volkanovski. I've been saying that.
Crazy good fight, actually.
But also, how cool would it be if there was an interim or a vacant opportunity for Sugar Sean to fight, say, an Umar Nurmagomedov? That could be very interesting. And if Sugar Sean can beat a Nurmagomedov, now we're talking about him being potentially the best bantamweight of all time.
Well, I think he would need to beat Merab for sure for that to happen.
Yeah, true.
But you know, I mean, if he came back and beat Merab, you know, but Merab has 2 wins over him, so yeah, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
It's like Sean would have to go on a generational bantamweight run at the end of his career to be the 135 best of all time.
True,
but. I do like the Peter Yan fight. I hope that's what happens. I hope they make the Merab fight selfishly, that Peter Yan wins, just so we can see Sean back in a title fight. If Merab wins, you know, maybe they do something else. If you said like you're the wild card is Peter moves up to fight Volkanovski to have some fun before they both end their careers, you do a vacant with Umar or something like that. All those things make sense. Let's move into the final 3 fights of the night. These were 3, aside from the Diego Steve Garcia, but the Bo Nickal and the Mauricio Ruffy fight, really lopsided as far as the odds are concerned. And, I'm sorry, Josh Hokit, Derek Lewis.
We can't forget H-Town Zone.
I'm going through my head, like, you know, because I'm usually thinking, okay, we got to go 5 fights.
Yeah.
We got to go 7 here.
Yeah.
So Hokit and Lewis, let's touch on that real quick. As we said, he wants Pereira next. We all know Josh Hokit. If Alex Pereira stays at heavyweight, he's getting Josh Hokit next.
Yeah, and he wants to chama on Pereira's mama still. Yeah. And you look, Josh Hokit went out there and pitched a shutout, essentially. He didn't take any damage. You can't afford to get hit by Derek Lewis. He hits so hard. And at 41 years old, his punches are a little bit telegraphed. And we've got a guy who is a true athlete in Josh Hokit. He can move. His footwork is really good. If you go look at any of the footage of him on a football field, you see just how agile he is, and he's bringing that to MMA. Obviously, he's got this like drunken master motion that he likes to do at times, but that's really just to sort of bait people in and see what they're going to do. It looks like Josh Hokit is open to be hit, but his feet are always getting him out of range. And I thought that his game plan was actually beautiful, because Josh Hokit went out there and instead of showing no respect to Derek striking like he did against Curtis Blades and immediately just got after it with Curtis, he was like, I'm going to get in his face, but I'm not actually going to jump into range because one shot could end my night. So what he did was sort of saw what Derek Lewis could offer as far as power goes. And he saw, okay, there's a 2-3 and there's a 3-2. Derek's really not setting anything up with a jab. So that was what led him to throw in a little bit of offense just to get Derek reacting, only to set up the offensive wrestling. He had a beautiful takedown, single leg, pulled him down, got on top of Derek, was able to throw some strikes, ultimately tried an arm bar, which I think he needs to go maybe try a jiu-jitsu class to figure it out.
Put that thing over the thigh, change the angle on that, and you can get it. He was pulling it into his stomach.
But also Derek Lewis is a strong guy. That single arm is very hard to pull an arm bar off on. But what I think was really impressive was he utilized that grappling and the wrestling to kill the confidence of Derek Lewis. And then once that happened, he realized, okay, come round 2, I can start to put my hands together a little bit. And it wasn't like he reinvented the wheel as far as striking's concerned. He saw that Derek's lead hand was starting to drop down a little bit. He threw a beautiful 1-2 over the top. It landed flush. Both of them did.
That 1-2 couldn't miss.
So then he did the 1-2 again, and then he did it again. And I think he did 4 1-2s directly over the same angle and the same range every time and hit Derek all those times. And then, you know, of course, he was able to find that finish. I was very impressed with Josh Hokit. I think his athleticism is going to take him to world title fights in the UFC. And if the top of the division, who are great strikers, can't deal with his grappling, we will see the incredible Hoke become the UFC world champion.
Yeah, I mean, he's 1 fight away from fighting for a title.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Bo Nickal, Mauricio Ruffy, and Diego Lopes to cap off the UFC Freedom 250. Where you want to start, Bo Nickal or?
Yeah. Well, actually, let's do Mauricio Ruffy because that was the next fight.
Ruffy first. Okay, so. Biggest mismatch on the card as 100%. Far as the odds are concerned. Michael Chandler, Chris told us before we sat down to record, and I haven't verified this yet, but I will after we finish recording, that Michael Chandler has been removed from the UFC's roster.
Hate that for Iron Mike.
Yeah, so are they going to cut Iron Mike? He really didn't do much last night. He ran.
Yeah.
He didn't act like he wanted to be in there. He seemed like he was, okay, let me see if I can get a couple takedowns on this guy. oh, shoot, it's harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Let me kind of evade. Mauricio Ruffy, I think the best way to sum it up was playing with his food.
Yeah.
Easily defeated Michael Chandler with clean striking. He's one of the best and most electric strikers in the game. We thought that there may be some problems with the explosiveness and the grappling because we saw that Achilles heel against Benoit Saint Denis. I think BSD is really coming to his own in this new camp that he's on.
Yeah.
That's a different topic for a different day when we break down International Fight Week. But I do think that Ruffy is at the top of the heap when it comes to striking alone. I'm wondering and hoping that he can make the necessary adjustments in the grappling. And I do love, and as much as I love the fighting nerds, I love that he's with Volk.
Yeah, and Volkanovski clearly was able to help him a lot in this camp. I think that Ruffy against Michael Chandler, even though the opposition wasn't as tough as we've seen him fight in the past, he looked as good as you could look. Michael Chandler looked like a heavy bag in there for Mauricio Ruffy to train against.
Yeah.
Ruffy had no respect for Michael Chandler's striking, and Michael Chandler had too much respect for Ruffy's. He was not willing to engage. If he was trying to jump in, he was lunging in really far and leaving himself exposed. A couple times he would like lunge in and like grab Ruffy's hand just to make sure there was no offense coming his direction. And that's never the way you want to approach a fight like this. You got to get in a guy like Ruffy's face, and you got to get him out of the range that he's most comfortable in, which is that kickboxing range. And he's willing to let you take a step in so he can jump off to a slight angle and then find his shots. You could see exactly what he was looking for, a step off to the side, overhand on Chandler or something like that. But by the time he killed the confidence of Michael Chandler and had him up against the cage, I mean, Chandler was just shelled up in a high guard situation, and Ruffy was just in there looking for shots like you would be looking for shots on a heavy bag practicing. Ruffy was one of the standout guys from the Freedom 250 card, and that performance, especially given the way the title fight, the main event went, makes me really intrigued to see how Ruffy would do against a guy like Ilia Topuria. Now, I think Ruffy should fight and get more active and fight probably 2 more times before we see Ilia Topuria. But Ruffy versus Topuria would be very interesting because, you know, Topuria is a shorter guy like Michael Chandler. Ruffy's long. He knows how to fight at range. And while I would say right now Ilia Topuria is a more complete martial artist, I don't know if he could deal with Mauricio Ruffy's striking because he couldn't deal with Justin Gaethje's. And Mauricio showed us there's some serious pop on his shots, and he knows how to manipulate his opponents into playing his fight and staying at the range that he prefers.
Yeah, totally. And I know I glazed over it in the beginning and forgot to tell you who I think Ilia should fight next. So you brought up Topuria as a potential for Ruffy. I think win or lose Paddy Pimblett if it's an all-out war, and he needs, let's say, 9 to 12 months as well to recover. Those two guys have heat. They hate each other.
Sure.
They've been talking smack for a long time. Why not make that fight? Maybe you'll talk about that on Matchmaker Monday. Maybe that'll be your pick. Maybe you got something else in mind. But
you'll have to tune in to find out.
It's hard to predict what's next for a fighter whose next fight is probably a year away. Bo Nickal looked really good. Bo has always had good power. His striking technique probably needed a little bit of cleanup.
Yeah.
He's looking like he's making improvements. We know his wrestling is elite. The bigger thing to me is, and it's kind of the Michael Chandler conversation as well, Kyle Dawkins and Michael Chandler just didn't show up to fight.
Yeah, and I don't want to kick a guy while he's down, but Kyle Dawkins did sort of lay an egg. He didn't show up and fight to the best of his abilities. We know he's a better fighter than what he showed us against Bo, but I have to give credit to Bo. And leading into this fight, I said, you don't overthink this fight. Bo Nickal is going to go back to what he knows can win fights, which is his superior wrestling over pretty much everybody in the sport. I mean, his wrestling is next level. That takedown that he had in the very beginning of the fight, very high level. And as soon as you can get a guy worried about any sort of level change, worried about any sort of feint, that will open up your striking. And look, Bo is a heavy-handed individual. He knows how to chunk heavy leather. And if he can get people worried about his grappling, and, you know, let's just say that he takes them down and they get back up to their feet, they're going to be way more cautious and timid when it does come time to strike. And that's when his striking will open up. But I think as long as Bo Nickal fights like he did at the White House lawn, he will have success and could definitely climb the rankings because he's got got power in his hands. He knows how to throw, and he's not afraid to close distance because he's not really worried about anybody else shooting on him and taking him down. Now, we saw him sort of give up against RDR, but I think after last night, we're going to see a rejuvenated, fresh, new Bo Nickal. I can't wait to see what he does. I don't think Kyle Dawkins brought the dog that he needed to bring to beat a guy like Bo Nickal, but I think Bo Nickal just inserted himself into an upper echelon of middleweights, and I would love to see him fight some more notable
10 to 15. Somebody 10 to 15 in the rankings is who Bo should. I'd need to look at the rankings to see. Again, shameless plug. I'm sure you got somebody in mind for Matchmaker Monday.
And it's a good one.
So Diego Lopes, right?
Yes.
I thought he was losing the fight. I thought Steve Garcia was winning the outside foot battle.
Yep.
He was landing the better shots. The thing about Diego is you can never count him out because he's always dangerous and he can end the fight at any minute. And if you allow him to put his ass on the line and bite down and throw, he will take that opportunity 10 times out of 10. Volk has his number because Volk doesn't fight that way.
No.
Volk fights very intelligently. He's going to enter on his terms, exit on his terms, and he's perfectly comfortable putting on a masterclass for 25 minutes. Steve Garcia, I feel like, abandoned the game plan to some degree and engaged in let's just stand and throw because he was having success with the hands. You know what? I think I got this guy's number. Let me step in there and throw. The last mistake he made in the fight cost him the fight.
Yeah, Diego Lopes versus Steve Garcia was very reminiscent of Diego Lopes versus John Silva.
Yeah.
John Silva won every exchange in that fight until he got, knocked out. Steve Garcia pretty much won every exchange that they had in that first round. That was not a competitive first round. And Diego got hit a few times. The thing that stuck out to me was Steve would kind of jump in with that lead hand hook, and he was able to find it, not with a ton of power on it, but enough to get Diego's attention. And then, of course, he was able to throw his combinations. He wasn't gun shy. Diego Lopes seemed a little gun shy, but Diego's ability to wipe the slate clean after a round where he clearly lost and come back out on the attack. And look, the second round wasn't really going his way either, but he can change the fight with a single shot. He's got real power at 145. And Diego Lopes is just one of those fan favorites. 10 years from now, we're going to be like, dude, that was the guy. That was he's the next gen BMF.
He'll be fighting for a BMF title at some point in his career.
100%. I love Diego Lopes. I love the cowboy hat. I think the music they both came out to was pretty awesome. But Steve Garcia made a careless mistake, got cracked by a big shot off Diego Lopes, and then he got into like a fight or flight situation where he started to plant his feet and get into an exchange with Diego, and that's not where you want to fight Diego. Nobody wants to fight Diego in a firefight exchange. That's exactly where Steve Garcia wound up in round 2, and that's why he didn't even make it to the end of that second round. Diego Lopes looked very good.
Yeah, I mean, good enough to say mark it down. We got to do Volk versus Lopes 3.
Please, God, no. But I do think that Diego Lopes will be a guy that gets another title shot. And I wouldn't be mad if we saw Diego Lopes at 155 sooner than later. If he can't find a way, or if Volkanovski wants to stay for 3 or 4 more, maybe there's no chance for him to actually get to the belt. But Diego Lopes at 155 also intrigues me quite a bit.
Yeah, but all it takes is somebody. I mean, he even said, he's like, look, Volk's got my number. I can't fight for a belt till he retires. I understand that. He's very self-aware as far as that's concerned. All it takes is somebody to knock Volk off or Volk to retire.
Sure.
But either one of those things could happen in the next 12 months.
Sure.
So, I love Volkanovski. I think he's the GOAT of 145 pretty comfortably.
Well, and Diego made his debut against Movsar, and if Movsar is going to be next for Volk, and if he's able to beat Volk, and then maybe Volk retires,
Diego Movsar too makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Now with some gold on the line, I think that'd be a good opportunity for Diego.
For sure. And let's move into wrestling, RAF. So Aaron Pico, Arman Tsarukyan, Khamzat Chimaev, 3 of the UFC fighters, competed in wrestling. All 3 dominated. All 3, I think, technical fall, won their fights by domination. Khamzat Chimaev, of course, a little bit more extracurricular because his opponent was none other than the world-famous Mr. Dillon Danis. And if there's ever going to be drama on a fight card and you need to guarantee that, you call Dillon Danis and put him on the card.
Yeah, Conor McGregor's name is the infamous, or the notorious, right? But I think that Dillon Danis has actually become the notorious guy in MMA, and he might have just picked that up off of Conor. But Dillon Danis is the kind of guy where you never know what to expect except expect mayhem. Yeah. Like him versus Khamzat Chimaev was the fastest match that RAF has had in their history. It lasted like 40 seconds. And obviously, Khamzat comes from a very credentialed detailed wrestling background as far as Europe is concerned. And Dillon Danis, I mean, they said like 15-time jiu-jitsu world champion. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of padding stats on there. He's not a 15-time black belt jiu-jitsu world champion, but he is a 15-time world champ, and he's very good. But what Khamzat Chimaev did was agreed to a wrestling rule set. And that is what left his neck exposed, because as soon as Dillon Danis got in a position where he was about to get rolled onto his back, and you even heard Chael Sonnen and the commentary team said, oh, this is about to get really bad for Dillon, because they were looking at it from a wrestling standpoint. They're like, oh, he's about to have his back flat on the mat. The thing about Dillon, though, is he doesn't really care about the rule sets. I think he wants to clip farm. I think he wants to be able to have these, still shots that go down in history. And he had Khamzat Chimaev dead to rights in a guillotine that was obviously, at first it started as like a arm in guillotine. And originally, I think he was going to try to continue wrestling because he grabbed the torso of Khamzat and was going to maybe try to roll him over and continue the scramble. But as soon as he felt Khamzat circle off to his side and basically wind up in a side control type position, he used his arm, pulled himself over to create a little bit of space, took this arm off the torso, slid it right under the neck, and then he had a deep grip on that guillotine choke on Khamzat Chimaev. And I didn't see Khamzat tap, and I actually saw that Khamzat said, if Dillon Danis were to tap me, I would never train anything ever again. Like, I'm not going to get tapped by this guy. But at the same time, that was a very tight choke. And I don't predict for you that if they did a jiu-jitsu or a submission-only type of grappling match, that Khamzat would put himself in a position to get guillotined by Dillon Danis. But because of the rule set of wrestling and the ability to maybe leave your neck exposed because there's no submissions on the table, that's what gave Dillon Danis that perfect opportunity. Anytime you have Dillon Danis on an event, Dana White even said it himself. He goes, that's not my fighter, but every time he goes out there, there's going to be a brawl. So if you're in the business of promoting Dillon Danis, just understand you got to beef up your security a little bit and expect there to be a 20, 30, 40, 50 man brawl on whatever venue grounds you're at.
Well, I mean, he tried to do jiu-jitsu in a boxing match against Logan Paul, so
True.
We kind of knew that he was going to try to do jiu-jitsu in a wrestling match. It's more of a grappling-centered match against Khamzat Chimaev. Now, Boris didn't expect the guillotine because there's no guillotines in wrestling, right? So could he catch Khamzat in a submission-only match? I don't know. Maybe RAF should do. I don't think they, you know what?
Hype Brazil can do it.
Scrap that. Hype Brazil can do it. RAF is doing a good thing with pure wrestling. Yeah. I think they need to stick to that. But
I actually do like it. Yeah.
Same. I would be interested to see Khamzat do a submission-only match with Dillon Danis. So obviously, Khamzat easily beat him in the wrestling. That's what we all expected, right?
But I have a question for you. So Dillon Danis obviously broke the rules that RAF laid out for this RAF match. But Khamzat Chimaev also got up and then kicked him. So they disqualified Dillon. No doubt he deserves to be disqualified for breaking the rules and doing something illegal. But Khamzat Chimaev then kicks him. So I don't really understand how we get to the point where Khamzat gets his hand raised and he's considered the victor when he also broke the rules. Like, if you and I are in a fight and we agree to a certain set of rules and I break those rules and then you start to break the rules as well, it's not like, oh, well, he broke the rules first, so you're allowed to kick him in the head because it's a wrestling match. And I know he didn't kick him in the head, he kicked him in the leg. But as soon as a rule is broken, it doesn't mean that it's just open season to do whatever you want. But I also understand that Khamzat isn't the one that started it. Dillon's the one that started it. And obviously, once it's a brawl, I guess the competition officially ends. And that's how they come up with their results. But I was a little bit confused. It felt to me like the right decision to be made was a no contest. And unfortunately for Dillon Danis, I don't know if RAF is going to want to sign him again if he brings these type of antics, but we didn't see him do that same sort of stuff with Colby Covington, and he still got beat by Colby. So I'm interested to see, but I think that Dillon Danis is always able to go viral. And I mean, he's the bad guy for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. He committed the foul that caused the disqualification. At that point in time, fight's over, and then Khamzat kicks him. So maybe Khamzat's penalized, but I think the right call was Khamzat win. Arman Tsarukyan and Aaron Pico. Arman just continues to tech fall people in a sport that's not his own. And Aaron Pico coming back against Lance Palmer, 10 years removed from his last wrestling competition, and also gets the tech fall.
Arman Tsarukyan's generational run is still alive and well. The dude can't miss. And now he's undefeated in RAF. I mean, to go out there with Tony Ferguson, who has wrestled pure wrestling against John Jones back in the day. He's wrestled against the who's who. He is a legit competitor when it comes to pure wrestling. He got shut out. He didn't score any points on Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan was able to go out there and make it look easy and kind of play with his food a little bit. Now, Arman is more in his prime. He's younger. He's really strong. Tony Ferguson isn't the guy that is known as El Kukui and the boogeyman of the 155 division anymore. But when you take the striking out and you take the submissions out and you let him go do pure wrestling, that's one of his backgrounds. He really does thrive in the wrestling. For Arman Tsarukyan to go out there and beat a guy like Tony Ferguson the way he did and beat everybody else in his past so far at RAF just speaks volumes to his level. It also opens up my eyes to how a fight with him and Ilia would have gone had we seen that, if Ilia would have won. Maybe we will see it at some point, but I would say the heavy favorite on the ground in that fight when we see it in mixed martial arts will be Arman Tsarukyan. I don't think Ilia Topuria will be able to grapple with Arman at the same level that Arman is able to show us.
Yeah, I think that's a good synopsis there. And, you know, who knows, that fight still has some heat on it. But I think that Ilia needs a long time off. Arman's going to probably, hopefully, fight soon in the UFC. I mean, he's having a generational run, but there's not much MMA involved in it. So I'd like to see that generational run take a turn back to the UFC. That would be awesome.
And he capped the night, too, by throwing his wrestling shoes into the crowd, which was pretty cool, and then facing off with his next RAF opponent in Colby Covington. And obviously, those two know how to fabricate a beef. Colby seems like actually a legit nice guy, and Arman also seems like a very nice guy as well. A little bit, you know, short-tempered and a hot fuse, but at the same time, a nice guy nonetheless. So I can't wait to see that fight. But at the end of the day, Arman is an MMA fighter. We got to see him fighting in the cage again soon. The UFC needs to do what they need to do to figure out who his next opponent is, whether it's Justin Gaethje for a title, whether it's Charles Oliveira for a BMF, or whether it's Ilia Topuria to see which one of them belongs in a title fight. Just get Arman back in the octagon, because God, after this generational run, we do need to see him competing in MMA.
For sure. And Aaron Pico, what did you think? I mean, Lance Palmer's legit, right?
Lance Palmer's legit. Again, he's one of those guys that's a little bit older. Aaron Pico is very good at wrestling and boxing, but wrestling is one of those things where he just excels. So I was very impressed with his performance at RAF as well. And I think that RAF is a great platform for him to sort of introduce himself more and more to the MMA and the combat sports fans that weren't maybe privy to his years in Bellator, and they've only seen him fight 2 times in the UFC. So I think Aaron Pico's doing the right thing by staying active, and dude's bodied up, can wrestle his ass off, and I think there's some fun matchups at RAF for him.
Yeah, I think it shows how good he could have gone the route of Olympic wrestling, but he decided to do MMA. But very good. Last thing I want to talk about today, Bam Rodriguez, the 26-year-old from San Antonio, Texas, moves like he's wearing ice skates on his feet. This guy's got footwork like you wouldn't believe. Knocked out Antonio Vargas in the 6th round, got a knockdown also in the 5th. Good power transition when he moved up to 118 pounds for bantamweight. And he's probably looking down the barrel of an Inoue fight. Now, they call Inoue the Southpaw Killer.
Yes.
And they don't call him that for no reason. And do you happen to know who is a southpaw?
Bam Rodriguez
is a southpaw. So big step up in competition, but Bam Rodriguez is a legit top 5 pound-for-pound guy in the world right now, as is Inoue. This feels like a massive fight in the making.
Yeah, Inoue is for sure one of the most skilled, if not the most skilled boxer in the world. And it's really cool that we're seeing 2 guys that are so small. You know, 118 is a tiny male frame, but their skills are absolutely on display every time they fight. And I think it would make for a really fun matchup because, as you said, Inoue is the Southpaw Killer, and Bam Rodriguez is the most lethal Southpaw, basically in boxing. To be able to have his knockout ratio at that small of a weight class says he's got real pop on his shot. And I will say his footwork is incredible, next to none. He's able to utilize that footwork, and he reminds me of Lomachenko, but even a little bit more buttoned up on the inside and able to throw really clean combinations and just keep his opponents guessing. So he does a lot of the same style steps that Lomachenko kind of made famous, but he didn't invent, but he made famous for the modern era. But Bam Rodriguez's head movement is also next level. He's able to get out of the way and under punches so well, so seamlessly. I was very impressed with his performance. And Vargas came out and fought a unique style, right? So we see volume punching in amateur boxing. A lot of, don't overextend on anything. Be sure you're centered and based in your feet and throw your combinations. Vargas did a good job at doing that. And sometimes when we see a pro boxer who has more of a pro style like Bam Rodriguez, they can end up having trouble with the amateur volume style, but he was able to figure it out. And while Vargas was a valiant opponent for him, he did a good job against one of the best boxers in the world. By the time the mid part of that fight started, about round 4, there was really nothing left, and he, Bam Rodriguez, that is, started to really find his groove. There was no way he was going to lose that fight, and the fact that he can go out there and be, in an opponent's face from the opening bell until he finds his knockout speaks volumes to his skill. I'm blown away with his skill, and I think that we need to see Inoue versus Bam Rodriguez very soon. I don't care who promotes it, whether it's Dana and Zuffa, whether Eddie Hearn does something, whoever it is, just make sure we get those two fighting. You can send it over to Japan because they did a pretty awesome thing for Inoue's last fight. That was really fun, but I would also love to see it here in America. I think Inoue deserves that sort of international press that he would get if they did it in, like, say, Vegas, the fight capital of the world. But Bam Rodriguez could wind up shocking the world and beating the Southpaw Killer.
There we go. I think that's a perfect place to leave it. Guys, if you have enjoyed this video and you have not yet hit that subscribe button, if you think we earned a subscription, don't be shy. Give it a slam and a thumbs up. We sincerely appreciate it. Make sure you come back for Matchmaker Monday, 8 p.m. live stream. Nick will be breaking down all the matches and who he thinks each fighter from UFC Freedom 250 should fight next. And until then, have a wonderful week.
Peace.